welcome to Weekly Reddit. In today's episode of r/entitled Parents, let my baby see the dog. Why aren't you listening to me? Are you deaf? Yes I am. Buggy over a wheelchair. Entitled Neighbours Kid Vandalizes our brand new car. Let my baby see the dog. I had an eventful Christmas. Between toxic family members and this situation, Lord knows I'm ready for 2021. Also obligatory on mobile. Cast. Me, the sarcastic smartass who was not in the mood for BS. Wife, mega hot sexy lady whom I love dearly. M, Miles the dog. S, Samson the dog. EM, entitled Mum. EB, entitled Brat, 8. AB, elder entitled Brat, had to be 14. G, Grandps who is walking on thin ice with me, but in this situation he was appreciated. So after an incredibly toxic family dinner, my wife and I decided to take our dogs on a walk. I have 2 dogs and both of them are rescues. The first one, named Miles, is Chonk Mr. Supreme. Super patient, and super kind. The other dog, named Samson, is an anxious mess. He was abused and he barks at random strangers. He is a sweet boy, but we've been working on leash aggression. Anyway, we began our walk around our neighborhood when my wife realized she forgot something. She had Samson and quickly ran inside to grab it. I believe it was gloves. It was cold outside. Don't quote me on that. As I'm waiting in our driveway, M and Eb walk by. It starts off as a normal neighborly talk, and then we wish a Merry Christmas. Eb stopped and pet Miles, which is completely fine with me. Miles likes attention, and he is a sweet dog who can handle it. M continues talking when I hear a bark come from our front door. I turn and my wife is standing in the doorway. She sees M and Eb and goes back in the house and waits for them to leave. That's always our routine with Samson, as he needs a minute to get used to being on his leash. Eb saw my other dog and ran over to the glass door to look at him. Samson is losing his shit behind the glass and I quickly run over and try to explain the normal he had a bad owner before we adopted him, so he is scared. The kid didn't care. He wanted to see Samson and he demanded to see him now. He put his hand on the doorknob to try and open it and I lightly pushed his hand off it. The M ran over, and I expected her to explain to her kid why he couldn't just open up someone's door. Especially during a pandemic, but instead she yells at me for pushing his hand off. I was taken aback but apologized nonetheless. I just wanted them to get away from the door. The little boy kept screaming he wanted to see Samson, and I was trying to explain to the mom why that wasn't possible when she crossed her arms and frowned. If he's so violent, maybe I should just call animal control. At this point my mood is terrible. I look at the woman and tell her that she can get off my property now and have a Merry Christmas. She rolls her eyes and takes Eb by the hand and walks to the street. She stands right off my driveway and crosses her arms and tells me that if I bring that dog out and it barks, she's going to call animal control. Eb is still screaming for the dog and I just look at my wife defeated. I felt like this is the type of woman who would follow us on the walk just to be petty. So I walked back into the house, took my dogs off the harnesses, and my wife and we went on our walk without them. That was fine. When we got back, however, my grandfather screaming at someone. My wife and I run over to see our back gate open. Eb and Ib, who is new, so sorry if that's confusing, were standing at the gate of our backyard with my grandpa standing between them. They had a super soaker and were wanting to spray our dogs for being mean dogs. I took the water gun from them and broke it. Then I tossed it into the street. Probably over dramatic. But if Samson was back there when they were sneaking back, this could have gone really wrong. They ran off crying and the M came waddling back to our house. We wouldn't answer the door and so she stayed on our porch for 30 minutes and demanded we buy a new super soaker for her kids. When she finally left, she threatened to crack our gate open in the middle of the night so the dogs would get out. Thankfully my wife had the right mind to record this, so if anything happens we can bring it to the authorities. All this to say, please just listen to people when they're working with a reactive dog. Hope everyone here had a Merry Christmas. Happy holiday. Edit, I just wanted to thank everyone who gave awards. It was nice, a little surprise to wake up to. I'll keep you all updated on the situation as it unfolds. Hopefully this was the last thing that happens. I did buy a lock this morning. That's securely on there as we speak. I bought Samson and Miles a treat because cute, and I was almost tempted to buy a super soaker and spray them if I ever see them walking around. Just have it locked and loaded. However, I reminded myself I'm an adult and don't want to stir drama. Hopefully this is the last story of the Eb and Dib. Why aren't you listening to me? Are you deaf? Yes I am. This came up recently in conversation and made me laugh a lot, so I thought I would share, so hopefully someone else can get a kick out of it. I'm on mobile, so my bad for any crappy formatting. Also, I would like to add that despite having a rocky relationship with my mum at the time, I'm glad to say it's a lot better, so I can laugh about it. Growing up, I was introverted from the get-go because I was bullied and preferred reading, but my mum hated the fact I wasn't girly. I didn't want fairy tale books, I wanted encyclopedias on bones and autonomy. I didn't want to wear pretty dresses, etc. I wanted to wear jeans and baggy shirts. I didn't even get into makeup until I turned maybe 19, 20. Whereas my mum was that parent that always looked done up to the nines. So having a daughter who rejected all that, well, we clashed a lot. My mum has always been very big on respect. However, she was also the person in our family who others got sent to be straightened out when they were being a lot to handle, but because of this, she would flip at the slightest thing she perceived as being rude, disrespectful, etc. So because of this, in my family, everyone loved babysitting me because I was good kid, but my mum would always be like, why is she so good with you but is always so rude to me? I wasn't being rude. And even then it would upset me and make me pull away from her, which again, she would see as disrespect. Her favorite thing to complain about was that I ignored her, like, all the damn time. I would get grounded so much because she had apparently shouted on me and I didn't hear her, so she would assume that because I didn't answer, I was ignoring her. I cannot tell you how much this used to piss me off because my brother, the actual problem, and golden child, would get left off the hook all the damn time. It got to the point when I was about 12 I came home from the library telling my mum that I wanted to be a boy so she would treat me the same. 12-year-old me used her library card to get gender reassignment information and gave it to her. She flipped her goddamn lid, man. Still funniest thing I've ever witnessed. So, after basically being grounded for a good maybe 4 months on and off with a few days in between, my mum goes mental on me because I didn't bring down my laundry for her coming back to put on. Screaming at me, yelling, telling me I'm the worst kid, etc., and I'm just staring at her because I don't even know what's going on. When I asked her if I responded when she shouted, she just stopped shouting and looked at me confused. Why would I ask such a ridiculous question? Well, we had agreed that unless I respond to her, I haven't heard it. Did I respond? No, because I didn't hear her. When I pointed all this out, she locked me in my room screaming that she was getting me tested for being deaf. I had this all the time. She would say I was at it, and when I tried to explain I wasn't, she would shout that she was getting me tested so she could put a stop to my problem behavior. Well, that was the last straw for her because 3 days later, I was getting tested for my hearing because she had enough. I cannot tell you the smugness in my mum's face when we went. She was going on and on saying that I was ignoring her, pretending I couldn't hear her and was just being a problem kid, and she was sick of it. So she was getting me tested so once and for all, she could basically have something that proved she was right. She couldn't be wrong, you see, and since this had been doing on for a good 2/3 years at this point, she was done. Well, they tested me. Not only am I partially deaf in both ears, I can't tell what volume I'm talking at. Yep. Not only was I partially deaf, I was basically partially fucked with it. Because this was another complaint, that I was always shouting when I got excited or just talking, and I would get real confused because I was like, I'm just talking normally, whereas sometimes I would be near whispering and again, didn't realize. I cannot tell you how much satisfaction I still get to this day when I saw her jaw hit the floor when they came out with the results. My mum was so shocked, in fact, she made them do it again because apparently, 12-year-old me faked it. I faked the full thing. So they done it again, same result. She couldn't believe it, and for the first time I remember seeing it dawn on her, how she had been treating me and I had been telling the truth. That quickly went away though when her face went scarlet as I asked, does this mean you're going to stop grounding me and locking me in the room when I don't hear you? I was quickly hurried out the room at that point though, but the people looked shocked, which was pretty funny. On the way home, she barely looked at me and bought me MCDs. I've never let her live it down. It makes me laugh so much to think back on. Over a wheelchair. Little bit before the story. I broke my left ankle on 28th of November 2018. I had to have surgery and have a rod and pins put in. I was in a cast for 8 weeks and then was in a boot for a few weeks after that. Because of the cast, I had a wheelchair, as I also have knee problems from another previous injury from getting hit by a car a few years prior, in the right knee, and I struggled with crutches if I have to use them for a long period of time. So, this happened either December 2018/Jan 2019, I can't remember the exact date. So, due to me being stuck indoors bored due to my leg in a cast, my boyfriend at the time, we will call him X as he technically is now, took me over to my mum's. Everything was fine, we went by bus, it was a 5-minute bus journey. I didn't expect him to push me a 15/20ths of a minute walk to my mum's. I'm not exactly a stick insect, so I'm not light to push, my mum's. In the UK, it's usually one person in the wheelchair bit, I assume, if it's an actual wheelchair. I lived in London at the time, so buses are terrible anyways. Anyway, we got onto the bus, no problem. The next stop, a mum tried getting onto the bus with a double pushchair, not a buggy for a newborn, like a toddler pushchair. This is where the drama happens. So, the bus driver said she couldn't get on as there was a wheelchair on me. She then looked at me and my ex and was like, she has crutches, she doesn't need a wheelchair. I had my crutches as my mum lives in a very small 2-bedroom flat with my stepdad and 3 younger siblings, so the wheelchair had to be folded down before it went into the flat, so I used them to get to the front room from the front door, around the flat if I needed to use the bathroom, then from the front room to the front door when we left, with the support of my stepdad and ex in case my right knee gave out. Anyways, the bus driver said sorry, but a wheelchair is on, you can't get on. She woman looks at us again, looks at the driver and says she has crutches, she can use them, fold the wheelchair down and then I can get on. I'm a single mum and I need to get on this bus. The bus driver again said sorry, but you need to get off the bus, there is no room. Unless you want to fold your buggy down? It was clear her 2 kids were old enough to sit on a seat and the mum could sit on the outside seat, next to them. I also suffer with mental health problems, depression, social anxiety and emotionally unstable personality disorder, and at this point, I was trying not to have a panic attack as confrontation can affect me massively. The woman looks at us again and screams at me and my ex, you need to get up so me and my babies can get on the bus, you have crutches, pointing at me. You don't need to take up this space, it's for buggies and wheelchairs. My pain meds were wearing off by now and my ex could see how much pain I was in and he said, look, my GF is in pain, it's obvious and it is also obvious she can't walk, She has a leg cast on. Can you not wait for the next bus? The woman, with her kids now screaming, screams at the bus driver, make her move so I can get on the bus. I'm not walking and I'm not making my babies wait for another bus. At this point, the pain started making me feel lightheaded and sick, and everyone was getting annoyed. The bus driver asked her again politely to wait for the next bus. This woman refused to move, screamed that she was entitled to the wheelchair space and that I had no right to take it all up. This argument happened for a good 20/30ths of a minute by this time between her, the driver, and my ex. I felt really ill at this point, as a panic attack was forming and everyone was getting agitated. When my ex saw that I was about to have a panic attack, he shouted that she needed to get off the bus, that I wasn't well and it was clear that I couldn't walk. When she refused to move, the driver had to shut the bus down and call the police. At this point, I wanted to get off the bus and walk, get pushed home, as it was too much hassle, but my ex said no, he wasn't backing down, as we had the right to be in the wheelchair bit. 10 minutes later, police turned up, asked what was going on, and she screamed that women needs to move, I need to get home, my babies are getting tired. When they saw who she was pointing at, they said that with all the time she had wasted, she missed 3 buses and could have got on another one. The women then said she was entitled to get on this bus as it's the bus she tried to get on. Well, 10 minutes later, the police finally got her off the bus. She was still shouting, saying it should have been me who moved and that she needed that bus. The bus driver apologized to us all on the bus for the drama and we carried on our journey home. I'm not going to lie, but this experience is now the reason why every time I get on public transport, I have panic attacks, as I'm scared about being judged, even though I'm physically fine now. When I am in pain, I sometimes have to use my boot and crutches, but every time I'm out with them, I always at least get one person moan at me because I'm either slow, or taking up room. So when I'm in complete agony, to the point where the pain makes me want to throw up, I just suck it up and don't use them, because of people moaning. Edit. The funny thing was, she could see the cast. It's not like it was hidden. I had a bright purple cast, my favorite color, and I had shorts on, as my leggings wouldn't go over the cast. I kept a blanket in a bag that my ex carried, in case I got a bit cold on my legs. Entitled Neighbours Kid Vandalizes Our Brand New Car. Too long did not read at bottom. This incident happened about 15 years ago. I was 16 at the time. First, a little background. The guy who owns the house next door to my childhood home, where my parents still live, doesn't live there and rents the place out to tenants instead, so we got new neighbors roughly every 4 years or so. A few of these neighbors were nice, most were meh, and some, like the stars of our show, were absolute hell. This family consisted of a single mom with 2 sons in their early teens, an elderly grandmother who was constantly having health problems and eventually passed away, and their 2 cats, who were the silver lining to these horrible neighbors because the cats liked to hang out at our house and I enjoyed playing with them, although our cats didn't like the neighbor cats at all. They moved in around mid-2005, I was 16, so I was a bit older than the older of the 2 sons. Now, one of the things we hated about these neighbors of ours is that we frequently would hear loud pops and bangs coming from their yard because the 2 sons and their friends liked to play with fireworks, paintball guns, etc. And of course it disturbed us, especially my dad, who worked from home and his home office was right next to the neighbor's yard. But I always chose to ignore it. In early 2006 my parents traded our somewhat beat up, thanks in part to me, Toyota Camry station wagon for a shiny new Prius. My mom wanted to keep this car looking new, and forbade me from doing things such as eating in the car and would make me wipe my feet before I got in the car in order to keep the floor mats clean. It was okay with me because, like I said, I didn't treat our old car very nicely, but I was more mature now and could appreciate trying to keep things looking new. So one day, probably in early April, I heard the usual pops and bangs coming from the neighbor's yard and, as usual, just tuned it out. But then my mom went out to our car and discovered that somebody, and we had a very good idea who, had egged, paintballed, and even threw a rock at our new car, which made a sizable dent in the hood. We of course were outraged. Now if the neighbor's kid wanted us to not suspect him as the culprit, then he did a very bad job of destroying the evidence, as there was a trail of paintballs leading from our car parked in front of our house to the side yard, including behind the gate that leads into our backyard. They must have fired paintballs at the side of our house from their backyard, but because none of them actually hit our house, they probably decided to go for the car instead. In addition, the rock that was thrown at the car very obviously came from their yard, as there were a bunch of those rocks in their yard near the divider separating our yard from theirs. So, my mom took pictures of the scene and called the police. I don't recall if the police actually came by the house or not. It was low priority for them. But we had all the evidence we needed. My dad and I took the rock as well as one of the paintballs that hadn't splattered and went to the neighbor's house. We spoke to the older of the two boys, who confirmed that his brother had recently got a paintball gun and that he and his stupid friend had been fooling around with it. He couldn't say with 100% certainty that his brother and the friend were the ones responsible for the damage, but he said it most likely was them. My dad gave him his phone number and told him to have his mom give him a call. The next day, my dad received a phone call from the mom. And of course, she denied that her precious angel was responsible for the damage. She insisted that her son didn't have the type of paintballs that we found near the car, and in our backyard near their side, and that it must have been some rando vandal who grabbed a rock from their yard and threw it at our car. My dad of course didn't buy it. But she insisted that her dear son was innocent and refused to take any sort of responsibility. We ended up having to get the hood of our brand new car replaced, which entailed leaving the car in a body shop for several days. Thankfully my parents had another car. My parents chose not to take the family to court, because they could afford to pay for it themselves and they didn't want to have any more trouble. They just wanted it to be over. Honestly, if it were left up to me, I would have taken them to court, because those kids needed to learn that they can't go around purposely damaging other people's stuff and expect to get away with it, and because their mother denied that they were responsible for the vandalism, I doubt she disciplined them at all. I'm sure that someone like Judge Judy wouldn't have hesitated to give them a good lecture that the money that they would have had to pay for the damage to our property should have gone towards paying their rent and taking care of their grandma, and that they needed to get jobs and be productive members of society. I don't even know why they did it, as we hadn't had any prior incidents with them. We continued to put up with hearing pops and bangs from their yard, and every time I heard them I would go out and check to make sure that the car was okay. Eventually, however, they moved away, and of course we all were relieved. My parents ended up giving the car to me when I got my driver's license. Too long did not read, neighbor's kid and his friend paintball and throw a rock at our brand new car. Their mother denies them having anything to do with it despite the obvious evidence.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up with the best content from Reddit.